Well, hello and welcome to the On It Not In It interview series. I'm your host, Todd Everett, and today I'm joined by Michael Frank Hauser, who is the owner of Carriage House Printery. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to kick us off with a brief background as to who you are and what you do?
Yeah, not a problem. I'm actually not the owner. My wife's the owner. I just work for her. Yeah, what we do here is we are an on-demand fabric printer. We buy fabric white and we print anything that our customers want printed on that, and it's all on demand. So we don't have anything in stock. It's as soon as an order comes in, we print it and then it goes back out. So think of Joanne Fabrics on demand.
Interesting. So you're not embroidering or screen printing, you're printing patterns on fabric.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. When you start looking at the embroidering and the screen printing and all of that stuff, um, that's I'm not gonna say it's older technology, but it's not as in-depth as what we do. So think more like a sporting jersey or
Okay.
like a bicycle jersey. And what that is we actually print on the fabric before we sew it. So then it can be an all-over print.
I gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
yeah, our customers will make custom pajamas for their kids and stuff like that. Home decor, pillows.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, I did see seamstresses and folks like that on it, and I was like, okay, that's different than the typical like printing company. But let's find out what Michael's company really does. So you did start, and you did tell us that your wife actually owns the business. You
Mhm.
work for her, so obviously you guys are partners in the business, I would assume, correct?
Correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So partners at home, partners in business. Find that so often in the entrepreneurial world where couples start a business together because one has one set of skills and the other has the other set of skills, and you just work a business together, which is a lot of together time.
It's a lot of together time. Yeah, you can see my office is about the size of a bathroom, and there's three of us in here.
Oh,
So
gotcha. Gotcha.
yeah.
Excellent. So let's start at the very beginning. I'm sorry, Michael, I interrupted you. What would you say?
I was just saying it's a lot of together time. We'll put the kids on the bus. We work about a mile from the shop, ride in together, sit in the same office together, eat lunch together, and then go home.
Excellent. Excellent. So you guys probably never fight, right? Because you don't have time for it and you don't have space for it.
No space.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let me start with my first kind of question around this. Okay, so you have a business with your wife. It's about 5 years old. I saw on LinkedIn. Is that about right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what inspired you to kick and start this business in the first place?
That's an interesting story. So I was an arborist by trade, and I invented some climbing equipment and patented it. And then there's a company called Weaver Leather that I sold my IP to. So, and when they bought that, they actually hired me to run one of their divisions. When I got there, what I was doing was I was looking at all their operations to try to figure out what they could do, what they couldn't do, what they were good at, and trying to figure out how to make them as much money as possible, which is what I was told what my job was. And I realized that they were doing a ton of cutting and sewing, and they weren't going to end consumer. So we had very, very slim margins on some of the stuff. And I was looking for a way to basically increase the margin without increasing the workload. So it didn't necessarily fit their business model because their business was basically B to B to B to B to B. And I came up with a business model that was very much from B to C. And so it didn't really necessarily fit with their model. But what we did was we ended up buying a printer with the idea that we were going to help bring that technology to what they already do. And honestly, it didn't work out. Like it didn't fit their business model. They didn't want any part of it. And we ended up with a printer. I asked my wife to start selling fabric on the side to see what else we could do. And before we knew it, we ended up far surpassing what Weaver could have done with us. So then I ended up leaving Weaver and working full time for Shan.
Excellent, excellent. So what you're talking about there, and I love that story because I think for a lot of everyday, what I would call the corporate worker folks that I was for 25 years before I became an entrepreneur, we see problems, but we don't figure out the solution to come up with something new. We might figure out a way to solve the problem, like you said, increase margins inside the business or whatever it is to make it effective. But you
Yeah.
kind of crafted a whole different business model that goes direct to consumers, which is an entrepreneurial, like that's the spirit of the entrepreneur, right? They see an opportunity in the market and say, I fit there. and they create a whole different business. And that's what you guys have been able to do. So that's awesome. Congratulations. And thanks for sharing that story. So, okay. So you got this business 5 years, been very successful very quickly, sounds like. So tell us, what are some common misconceptions that when you started your business, you thought it was going to be like this and it's turned out something different?
That's funny. So the problem is I didn't do a whole lot of thinking. So I can't honestly sit here and say that I thought it was going to be something else. I'm more of a like jump and see where I land kind of guy, which is it's not necessarily a good thing, but it's the way I'm wired. Um, One of the things that I definitely got absolutely sidetracked with was employees, honestly. So my personality is very much like, you give me a problem and a pack of gum and a roll of duct tape, and I'm as happy as can be. Like I love fixing problems. I love when somebody trusts me to do something. If you give me like whatever you give me, I'm just going to work until I get it done. It's just the way I am. And I'm not super motivated by money. I'm not motivated by normal stuff, but we're all egocentric. So what happened is whenever we started getting employees, people would say like, "Oh, you got to cut people loose, and you got to do this, and you got to do that, and you got to trust them." And I'm sitting there going like, "I got the opposite problem, right?" Like we'd have an employee, and I'd be like, "Yeah, there's a $500,000 printer. Go figure it out." They don't like that. So yeah, so that was the thing that really got me into trouble is taking advice that was mainstream and then not realizing that I wasn't necessarily the audience for that. So I actually had to go backwards and had to walk my employees through stuff and try to do more training and that kind of thing. And people would say like, "Oh, generally you don't trust your employees, and you don't cut them loose, and you don't do this, and you don't do that." That wasn't me. I was on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, excellent. So what you're talking a little bit about there, I think, if I don't know, put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but you were getting some advice that would say, hey, if you're going to hire people, you got to let them do their thing and give them control and power to do what they need to do to make decisions. But
Yeah.
if you did that, you didn't give them the proper training or whatever the things, and you realize, oh, I got to pull back and retrain some folks. Is that what happened?
Yeah, yeah. And it was really just treating my employees the way that I'm wired instead of trying to figure out how they're wired.
Yeah, and that's, you know what, I love that. That's a great example of that's a pretty common thing. We often will interact with other people in the way that we prefer to be interacted with. Like just like you said, give me some bubble gum and some duct tape and show me the problem. I'll be out in an hour and have it figured out. But that's not how everybody's wired. And if you treat everybody the same way, it's kind of like treating every problem with a hammer instead of a screwdriver and a hammer and a saw or whatever the toolbox you need, right? So it sounds
Yeah.
like you've grown through that. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's hard, but yeah,
Okay. So still working on that issue.
still a work in progress. Yeah.
So maybe learning how to interact with different types of folks and how they learn. What other kind of challenges do you see in your business today? Before we kicked off today, you told me it's been a bit of a rough week, which is really common in the entrepreneur world. So is there some real common challenges that you're faced with right now?
Yeah, we've had some really weird stuff happen in our industry. Because we work in textile, everything's imported. Okay. So we had 5, 6 years ago when we started, imports were very favorite, like they worked for us. And then all the rules got changed. So basically, where you could import a full t-shirt and not have the duties and taxes that you would have on the fabric to build a t-shirt. I don't know why it's like that, but all of a sudden, between that speculation on fabric, prices going up, I mean, it was crazy. And in an industry like what we do, you make pennies, right? Like you're not making $20 on a yard. And a lot of entrepreneurial business plans are like, I'm going to buy this thing for $2 and sell it for 50, right? Like that's how normal businesses start up. They get this really crazy low-hanging fruit. We're not really like that. Our business model is more like we need, $2 million worth of stuff and a building and equipment and all this other stuff, and we're going to make 50 cents a yard if we're lucky. So because we didn't come from that background, all of a sudden when my fabric prices went up $3 and my business model only accounted for 50 cents worth of profit, it's kind of a problem. The other thing that we saw that happen that really kicked my teeth in was when we started with SBA loans, right? Well, with what happened with interest rates, my SBA loans, the interest quadrupled. So now you've got $500,000 of loan that has the interest that quadruples, and you only had a 50% margin on a yard. You get on the wrong side of the line really, really quick if you're not careful. So we're learning a lot, and it's hard, and it's across our whole industry is struggling really bad with this. We're actually coming out ahead of most people. But yeah, those are the kind of things that I didn't see coming. Like I would have never in a million years thought that I was going to be paying 3 times what I was taking home on SBA loans, within 6 months of taking the thing out. It was
Yeah.
very predatory.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Michael. I interrupted you.
Oh, I was just saying it was very predatory feeling.
Yeah, I can understand that. So yeah, so I think what you're talking about is maybe some impact of the pandemic to the cost of things. So the inflationary side of things, and whatever you want to call the issues of inflation. There's lots of levers that have probably caused our inflation to go up. But then on top of that, with the raising interest rates, your loan payments get much higher without you really doing anything, without getting any more cash, right? And so now all of a sudden it's either make more revenue quickly or figure out a way to make more than 50 cents a yard in profit, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing that we did that we didn't see coming was when we started this, our target market was stay-at-home moms. So we were actually helping women have really cool Etsy stores. And when they have extra money, it worked well. When the economy started to slump, the first thing they got rid of was their extra fabric money. So our customer base dried up a little bit on top of that. And you really never know exactly what's going on. You just know that there's these moving parts, you know? And I've always come from service background. I mean, I worked in trees, I worked in all kinds of service stuff. You just don't have things moving like this. Like it just doesn't move, and you don't have the overhead, you don't have the exposure. All of a sudden we have this business that's way bigger than anything I ever had. And that kind of hurt us a little bit. So, and then on top of it, our biggest competitor, which is we're not even a competitor to them because we're not anywhere near their size, but there's this company Spoonflower, and they got bought out by Shutterfly. So all of a sudden our biggest competitor got really big. Like, and we're national, like we're a teeny tiny company on a national frame. And then what happens is, if you're a little service industry, you're only competing with the little service guys next to you. And even if you're competing with the service guys, that's a national brand, they still have to put people there. When you start to do internet sales, you're competing on anybody who has an internet connection.
Yep. Yeah, and I think you know what that's I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's something that, I mean, look what's happened with Amazon since the pandemic and even before it was starting to happen, but people got really used to just sitting at their house and clicking the button, right? And
Mhm.
now you can click your button and get your groceries. You can click your button. So there's a lot of industries, a lot of retailers, a lot of folks that are suffering. I appreciate that you're sharing that with our listeners and our viewers. I'm assuming that a lot of people will also be struggling in that same space. So thanks for the thoughts, the struggles there. So let me ask the follow-up question. What are you doing to innovate and try to push back on some of that competitive energy that's hitting you in the face right now?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, I didn't say that to complain. It doesn't do any good.
Yep.
Just to be clear to listeners, right? Like it's not going to work. Because sitting here and complaining is just it's wasted energy. So what we did, the first thing we did is we didn't see it coming. Okay. So I've always had the attitude of if I'm not winning, then like whatever's going on, I need to work harder. So when this thing first started to rear its head and we started to lose ground in the market, what I did is I started innovating and I started making things better, increasing the quality of our fabrics, increasing quality of everything we possibly could. The problem is again, if you're working on a small scale and you're competing with somebody that's physically there, that actually works. When you get into these upper echelon business things, it's kind of like it doesn't matter if you outrun the bear. You know, it, it that's you can be a million times better than them, and it's not going to matter because they have marketing, right? So what we were doing is we were focusing on our product and not necessarily our marketing. And what we should have been doing is we should have put a little bit more money on the marketing side, or try to find avenues to market that they couldn't beat us so bad at, which is what we ended up doing. So we started changing our marketing, we started doing all that stuff. But honestly, when it first happened, my gut wrench response was to go out and make us better, right? Better fabric, better turnaround time, better color. Like that's going to fix it. I'm going to have a better product. But the thing is when you're doing internet sales, if you're not seen, it doesn't matter what you're doing. So
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
one,
great point.
yeah, that was one of the things that I learned definitely the hard way.
Okay, and so you've now started pushing more resources to that internet marketing so that you can be seen. Is that what you're doing today?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You have to change the way you do stuff, and you got to adapt, and honestly, a lot of it you're not going to beat those guys, right? Like whenever we had stuff going on with the really really big national brands, and they were spending more money per click than the cost of a ticket. So that doesn't make financial sense, right? Like they're playing a completely different game than I'm playing. My game is I buy fabric for X and I sell it for X plus something. They're now public and they're trying to get market share and they're trying to raise money in second, third, fourth rounds, and they just want to be able to go to their investors and show their investors how big they are so they get an extra $100 million. So that makes it really interesting. And from an entrepreneurial standpoint, making the jump from like I like to call it like business that makes sense, right? Like service-based industries, dentist office, stuff like that, where it makes sense to jumping into this new round. It it was an eye opener, because it's not the same game.
Well, excellent. Again, I think that that's a really relevant story to share, and I think that a lot of our listeners will really resonate with that story because I'm sure that you are not the only person that has struggled in the way that you're talking about because the pandemic, the inflation, the interest rates, and everything else that are on the one side, and then the big guys that come along and buy up a competitor, like you mentioned, and suddenly now you're a tiny little minnow like, swimming against a big old shark, right, in the same ocean, and that can be rough. So okay, so all right. Well, it sounds like you're learning and you're growing through those things, and you're getting through some of those obstacles. So, have you had a chance to really look forward and say, okay, our future plans now that we've gotten some of these learnings behind us? Here's what we want to do in the next couple of years. Have you thought forward yet?
Yeah, I mean, we had big plans. We were growing so fast, and to put it in perspective, we were growing 900% year over year.
Significant.
And it's totally self-funded, which means we were just turning cash like crazy. We got to the point where we started in behind our house in a 1,600 square foot building. Then we moved within a year to a 7,000 square foot building. And within 6 months of moving into our new building, we had outgrown it.
Jeez.
So we then, and I was trying to pump the brakes because that kind of growth is hard to control, but you don't want to pump it too hard. So then what we did is we actually bought a piece of property down the road and started developing it for a future building, just as a way to, like a way to move if we had to. And then that's really when things started to go south. And that was all through the pandemic. We were fine. Um, Business was okay. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad. It was good. Really, it happened after the government quit sending out free money, after everything kind of came to a head. That's when things really started to go south, and that's when Spoonflower got bought out. Um, so then we were at a place where we had to pivot once again, and we ended up actually buying more equipment. We bought another company to try to like balance out our portfolio, stuff like that. So yeah, but that was our plan before. Going forward, what we really want to do is back to our original plan, which is cutting and sewing. So if we're going to compete on a national level with all these big guys that are bringing all this stuff in from China, what we need to do is we need to bring something to our customers that they've never seen before, right? Like we've got to do something completely different. We've got to do it more efficiently, and the way our technology works is it's set up similar to how you would get a bicycle jersey made. So you would actually print the fabric specifically for that garment or that product, whatever that is, and then we would cut that out and sew it independently. And we can do anything. I mean, we do everything from football field flags, like the big marching band flags,
Yeah.
to underwear, to ammo bags, to gun pouches, to anything that's textile that somebody wants custom made. That's our thing. So what we really have been doing is we've been building out the technology to allow our customers to say, hey, I want a shirt, this is my size, and then be able to work that through our system.
Got it.
So
Got it. And that's interesting. So that, again, finding another hole in the market space and saying we can fill that hole and differentiate against the big guys who are just printing materials, right? Which it sounds like that's the direction we're going. Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. So just one last question for you, Michael. What advice would you offer aspiring entrepreneurs or those that are getting started and kind of hitting some of those walls that you've been dealing with, like the loans and the things like that?
It's kind of funny you asked that because I've been helping with the local high schools talking to the kids, and that's one of the questions that they ask me. And time management is the biggest one. This is not for the faint of heart. And if you go into something like this, you don't get to clock out. And if it's not working well, you really don't get to clock out. So I think we've kind of, as a society, we've gotten a little bit weak, and we don't think that that's the way it works. And my fear would be is if somebody goes and says, hey, I want to start a business, and not realizing, when it's fun and you're making a ton of money, you get to go home. When it's not, you got to stay in the office and figure out how to right your ship. So that would be my advice, is to make sure you know what you're getting into and be willing to take that on, because the good is fun, right? And when it gets bad, it's not as much fun, but you're still here, you're tied to the hip.
Yeah, excellent advice. And so I think what you're referring to there is, yeah, entrepreneurs can make unlimited money because they own the business, but they can also get paid zero because they get paid last in the business, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Just-
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. I sold my car to make payroll about 6 months ago.
There you go. Great example. Great example.
How to do it. I mean, I can't not make payroll, and we had a car that I didn't technically need, so we sold it.
Great example. Thanks for sharing that as well. So, all right. Well, hey, Michael, I want to thank you for spending today with us, giving us some time out of your day. I know you're crazy and hectic. We really appreciate it. It was great meeting you and learning more about what your business does and your entrepreneurial journey. To everyone watching and listening, I look forward to seeing and listening, talking to you in the future. And Michael, thanks again. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for the talk.